Welcome to the first episode of the Entrepreneurs United podcast. On today's episode, Rich and I sit down with the CEO of CertaPro Painters, Mike Stone. Mike has a fascinating story of going from a sales representative to the CEO of the largest painting company in North America. His story of growth as an intrapreneur within the CertaPro organization is fascinating, and the keys to success are extremely valuable to all entrepreneurs or anybody looking to grow to the top of their organization. We hope you enjoy the conversation.
So with us is Mike Stone, who's the president and CEO of CertaPro Painters, also where I happen to work full-time. And Mike, first wanted to kick off with you and check in. You went from being a sales associate in CertaPro in a franchise in, I believe it was early 2000s, to now being president and CEO. Tell us a little bit about that journey and some lessons you've learned along the way, would you?
Yeah, my relationship with CertaPro actually goes back even before that. I started out as a residential sales associate in 1999 for a franchise owner named Dan Hutchins in San Diego, California. But Dan happened to be a college roommate of mine at the University of Iowa. And he actually, before he owned his CertaPro franchise, had a college pro painting franchise, which is at the time was a member of the franchise company, which was a conglomerate of many different franchise concepts. And so while Dan and I were roommates in college, I got to see firsthand, a college student trying to figure out how to get his degree and manage a business. And to Dan's credit, he figured out how to do both quite well. And surprisingly, for a college student, made a lot of money running a painting concept, which if you know what it's like to be a student, Rich, it's, ramen noodles, macaroni and cheese, spaghetti, and I was trying to work as a bartender through college and pay my own way. And so I'm seeing Dan driving around in back in the day, a Supra, which was like the coolest car, and he had jet skis. And I'm like, and he came from kind of the same walk of life I did. And so it dawned on me that he might be onto something pretty cool. And so we stayed in touch after college. I went and did some things that were not related at all to the painting industry. And our paths came back together because I was living in Chicago at the time and really wanted to change the scenery. And Dan said, "Why don't you move out to San Diego? I'm going to be starting this painting franchise that's full time." And so I was lucky enough to take that step, moved out there, and as Dan started growing his business, he really needed somebody who had a background in sales and marketing, and that's actually where my strengths lied. I got a degree in business with an emphasis in marketing and sports management, and had a ton of sales experience already, and became his residential sales associate.
Yeah. And Mike, there's so much more to go on that, but I just want to bring it back full circle. So, when I first moved out to Chicago as a GM of College Pro, Dan was one of my franchisees that I inherited from a prior GM. And, when you're a franchisee with a company called College Pro Painters back in the day, you'd have about 20 to 20 some franchisees, and you'd have 3 that are killing it. You'd have, 15 that are mucking it up, and you got 3 or 4 that are just disasters. And you'd spend all your time with, the ones that really need help. And I vividly remember going to visit Dan, and Dan was a second or third year franchisee making a lot of dough as a college student. And I was like, there's nothing I can really help you. So what are we going to do? Let's hang out. And we go sit at the bar you were bartending at and have drinks. And that's how I got to meet you, and the relationship there kind of, fostered. And I still shake my head today to think, here's somebody I knew that, was a friend of a franchisee who became a sales associate, and now is the CEO of this incredibly large organization. And that path from where you start as a sales associate to CEO is one that I think needs to be heard for tons of entrepreneurs out there, people that are currently in, intrapreneurs, we like to call them, right? They're in a company, they want to kind of rise their profile from, a sales manager to, a vice president or so on and so forth. Tell us about that path. that takes a lot of determination, a lot of hard work. I mean, what was your key to success? I mean, talk us through the steps you took from sales associate to CEO, and what were some of your key fundamental components that helped you rise so fast and so successfully?
Yeah, well, first of all, let's be clear. I'm humbled the fact that I have the privilege to run such an amazing company. And what I found very quickly when I got to be a part of CertaPro was that the organization, and including Dan, wanted to invest in developing anyone and everyone who had any sort of appetite for personal development. So whether it was around leadership skills or it was around just understanding the industry, they were going to invest in you. And so Dan, as a franchise owner, took it upon himself to say, hey, I'm going to send you off to Philadelphia, and really, I want you to learn the business as if you own the business. So we had this thing, it was called TSA, which was the training for new franchise owners. And at the time, in 1999, they didn't have a lot of salespeople working in franchises. It was a kind of a foreign concept. So he sent me off, and I'm in a classroom with all of the actual entrepreneurs who invested hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy these businesses. But Dan said, I want you to learn it and treat it as if it was your own. And so I think the mindset of being in an environment that really positions you, if you have an appetite for learning, which is one of our core values, is practicing continuous improvement and always challenging people to get better. If you're in an environment like that and you have any sort of competitive spirit to get better, which, I grew up playing sports as a kid, and, if you ask anyone who knows me, I just have this great will to win. And sometimes it's gotten in my way, and you want to win with honor, but I still just want to win. And part of winning is getting better. And I think that was probably a combination of maybe some intrinsic motivation, and then being in an environment that really fostered your own personal development was probably the key first part of that process that got me on a path towards leadership and really some great opportunity.
Yeah, it's funny, real quick. Yeah, I've asked a couple people, about your rise from where you are to CEO, and they say, if you want to see how competitive it is, just see him on the basketball court. So, but I think competitiveness is a huge piece, and I think as you look through and people listening to this who have just joined an organization, or they're entrepreneurial, doing their own thing, or they're an intrapreneur in an organization, to see what you've been able to do with that spirit is incredibly great. So congratulations on that.
Yeah. So let me take you a little bit more through the journey. Is that fair? So in '99, I was working for Dan as a residential sales associate, and he was creating opportunities for me to really expand my skill set. So I did just the new owner school training, but then he also said, why don't you go to commercial training? And so back then, CertaPro really was predominantly a residential painting brand. Did mostly residential exterior painting, and we had a few people join the organization that wanted to help us develop a commercial. And so Dan sent me back up to Philadelphia for that, and he started growing his business. We were one of the very first franchises to do over $1 million in sales, which in the early 2000s, that was kind of a big deal to do $1 million in painting. And that's when it dawned on me that I saw what really was possible with this franchise. We were in an industry, and I got to tell you, it's unbelievable, that is so fragmented. There's so much opportunity that when I saw what was possible, not only in San Diego, it dawned on me that what's possible for all of the franchises. And there was maybe like 15 people that worked on the corporate team. Most of it was self-taught, or hey, they have some leadership skills. Really put some time in these leadership skills. And so that's kind of what I did. And Dan really, created that environment for me, which is a testament to him as much as me being in the right place at the right time. And then kind of what happened, we got over $1 million, and it really, I saw that I thought we could be a $10 million painting franchise. He's like, whoa, Mike, you know, million to 10 million. I think
Yeah.
you're moving faster than I'm prepared to move. And you have to really respect that. I mean, he's the business owner. He's the one who's, you know, has to invest in the growth, and there's risk associated with that. And he was having some success. And so Dan and I came to a crossroads. I really wanted to be part of something much bigger than what he could provide for me. And, at that time, actually, John, I think I reached out to you. I don't know if you remember this, but it's 2003. I just had my oldest son, Kyle. He's a newborn baby, and my wife is from Philadelphia. And she says, I really just want to raise our kids near my family, and you have a bunch of family on the East Coast. So I think I'd really want to go home. And it was really a tough spot. I needed more than what Dan could offer me. And he was really cool about it. And he said, well, why don't you reach out to some people? And so he put me in touch with Charlie Chase. He put me in touch with you, John.
Yep.
And you referred me to a guy named Steve Herron, who was director of operations at Amco Transmissions. Do you remember that story?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so I interviewed with Amco Transmissions, and they offered me Mark Worth, the president CEO over there, offered me a job. And Charlie said, I can't do anything for you right now. There's some changes going on CertaPro Corporate. So I didn't have a job offer. I moved my family across the country. And what happened next was, I'm like, well, I've got to provide for my family. I'm living in my mother-in-law's basement looking for a house, but I don't have a job.
Yeah.
And so Steve Aaron offered me a position. And at the same time, CertaPro went through a huge leadership change, The president at the time was George Fougeron. He was let go. CertaPro was really in a bad spot. They'd been kind of stagnant, about a $50 million company at the time. And really we're not growing, and the franchisees were not making money, and it was not a good time for the organization. So the founder of the company came back, and he brought in Rich Wilson. I accepted a job at CertaPro before Charlie came back. They finally offered me a position, and then they made this massive transition. And Charlie walks in my office and says, look, I heard you were going to take a job at Amco. Are you with us or are you with them? And he had fired everyone in the company but me. And I think it was because basically I was too new to fire, you know, like, well, maybe we should give the guy a couple weeks before we let him go. And that's when they brought in Rich Wilson. And I would say Rich probably was the single most important person in my career development. He became my mentor.
That's great.
And I'll tell you a little bit more about that, but I'm sure you might have a question or two along that way. But it's so funny, our paths crossed multiple times, John, and you didn't even know what an influence you had in me.
Unbelievable. It's so funny.
Mike, you had mentioned one of the core values being practice continuous improvement. You noticed that early on when you were even working as a sales associate in Dan's business. As a president and CEO now, how do you practice continuous improvement? How do you stay sharp?
Well, I think there's a few different things, and I would say the most important thing is to have a thirst for knowledge, Rich. So practicing continuous improvement is about continuously looking for ways to do things better. So you need to continue to read. You need to continue to look at how other businesses do things. Rich, you've been a great influence on me in practicing continuous improvement, and I think the reason why I'm where I'm at now is Rich Wilson, who came in as the executive vice president when I was just basically I was a startup general manager and a trainer at CertaPro on the corporate team, but he always to speak to that practice continuous improvement piece, Rich, is he found a way to create some uncomfortable tension for me on how I was performing. Didn't make me feel bad about it, but just showed me some gaps in maybe how I was approaching things. And so whenever I had interaction with him, I got nervous in a kind of a good way. because I had to kind of be on my A game. I don't know if you know what I mean by that. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that has continuously pushed me forward. So I've been lucky enough to be around people who make me feel a little bit uncomfortable, including you, Rich. Like you know, Mike, you might consider this approach a little bit differently. Or when you shred my keynote speeches as an advisor,
Exactly.
you make me feel uncomfortable. And I think if you have enough introspection to say it's okay to be vulnerable and not be at your best, then you'll have a craving to get better. And I think that has propelled me. And look, I am by no means great at a lot of things, but when I have some uncomfortable tension, I think a little bit of that competitive spirit makes me want to get better. And then I'm lucky enough to be around people who aren't afraid to say you can do that better, including you, Rich. You've been a great influence on me in that way, and I'm humbly grateful that you have the fortitude to tell me that you can do better than that.
Mike, there's so much here, and you know, we talked earlier about competitiveness, right? And that's really one of those key things you've had. But you just, in a very short period of time here, went from one spectrum to the other, right? From being a sales associate to the CEO and president. And there's two big things on either side that I think are key to bring back. One is when you were a sales associate trying to grow within an organization, you were the one who was actually challenging your business owner, right? Or challenging the CEO of that business and saying, hey, let's go big. What else can we do? How else can we get there? And I see that as being a huge challenge in today's workforce. So if you're a young listener listening to this thing, you know, if you really want it, you need to be asking for it. What else can I do? And that trait, you know, continued with you probably all the way until, and even more still today where you are. What else can I do for certain? How else can we take it, right? And it's a huge trait. But then on the other spectrum, as CEO and president, you know, a lot of CEO and presidents say, you know, I got here, I know what's going on. I don't need, you know, some vice president challenging me on what's going on, but your openness to be continuously pushed. I mean, that's a huge trait that I think a lot of senior executives can learn from this call, is let your team help you be better, right? As you're helping them grow as well. I mean, so on either side of the spectrums, as a young associate or a senior, there's two real key components you brought up there that I think I just wanted to bring back because I think those are very important for people listening.
And John, what's consistent in that story is Mike was, I'm sure, uncomfortable challenging Dan that we could be bigger. And he said, we hit a crossroads, like that's not a comfortable place. Mm-hmm. And now as president and CEO, like there's this pattern of leaning into discomfort and allowing himself to be vulnerable, be seen by trusted people, but not constantly seeking comfort. I just got a book. I don't even know if I could find it to hold it up. Oh, I did. I was recommended a book by somebody that's Your Comfort Zone's Killing You. I just started it. Not sure that I'd fully recommend it quite yet. but Mike, what you brought up in both scenarios, like no matter what role and no matter where you were in your journey so far in your career, you were leaning into the discomfort. Can you speak to that just a little bit more and elaborate on it?
Yeah, especially during the times we're facing right now with COVID. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why everybody needs to lean in, right? So that's a great question, Rich.
Yeah, I think there's this is probably a product of my upbringing. I was raised mostly by a single mother until I was 14 before she remarried. And we moved 17 times in 17 years. So can you imagine going to how many different schools as a child that is? And look, my mom it was a tough spot for her in her life. But the only thing that was constant was change, right? That was what was constant in my life. And look, today's world is changing so fast with the pandemic associated with the COVID-19 and how we react and deal with things. You know, I can't even imagine how difficult it is to even fathom what it's like to potentially open public schools for children with, you know, getting thrown 97-mile-an-hour sliders when you're expecting a nice soft softball that you can knock out of the park. And so I think, no, I right, wrong, or indifferent, I grew up in an environment that required to be persevere through a lot of change. And I think it hardened me in a way that if you retract from the change, or if you know, turtle, wouldn't be a very good spot. An example is just being the new kid in school. You have to be more assertive if you want to make friends. I mean, that sort of thing. So one thing you've always said to me, Rich, is if you see something, you say something. And that goes to our core values at CertaPro. Like, if you see somebody doing something that isn't right, you have to have the fortitude, the courage to say something. You can do it in a respectful manner, treat people the right way. But if you feel like that they're doing something that's wrong, you owe it to yourself and to them to say something. And so I think that's probably served me pretty well. To your point around, if it's probably uncomfortable, it probably means you're learning. And a lot of people, that's scary, and I think, a credit to my mom. She wrapped me in love, and in spite of all the change we were going through, I felt supported and loved, even though we were going through a difficult time as a child. And I think that's probably served me pretty well. And look, our brand's going to have to continue to evolve here at CertaPro through this pandemic. And we know that our business is going to be very different probably on the other side. But if we lean in and ask the right questions, I think we're going to really create a ton of opportunity for a lot of people, and wealth creation for our business owners and their associates, and create opportunities for our painters, which will lift up the industry. And that's what gets me up every day.
Yeah. Mike, on that note, I mean, you have hundreds of entrepreneurs within your organization, which is kind of unique, right? A lot of times in a large organization, you have a lot of employees. In your situation, you have a lot of partners, you have a lot of leaders, you have a lot of entrepreneurs. And, what would you say? I mean, would you say leaning into challenges is what you would say the biggest key to success as an entrepreneur in your organization, or an intrapreneur in your organization? Because it seems to be a pretty core thing to your values and how you would maybe evaluate, successful entrepreneurs is, those people leaned into these challenges versus those who didn't. Is that fair, or are there keys to success?
I think that's fair. When you buy a franchise, you're in business for yourself, but you need to know you're not by yourself, right? You buy a franchise to mitigate a lot of the risk with starting up a business. And so our job in the beginning, really in the beginning, is you have to educate the franchise owner that this is the way, and follow the program and the process. But I think the reason why we continue to grow system-wide sales year over year over year, and productivity of our franchises is, one, we have great people who live our core values, and our core values are deliver what you promise, have pride in what you do, respect the individual, and practice continuous improvement. But I think we're in a situation where our culture is an environment of collaboration, and our franchise owners, they're entrepreneurial in spirit. And if we don't collaborate, which means we lean in and listen to ways they're doing things, they're little mini incubators of innovation. And the reason why Rich is the vice president of leadership and development is he's leaning in and seeing where our franchisees innovating and actually getting ahead of the curve. And the coolest thing about franchising is when somebody does something really, really well, to say, well, no, that's not the way we do it at CertaPro, is to say, okay, how does they're getting more productivity, they're getting better results. How do we find ways to take what they're doing and operationalize it for our business model, to help our people achieve their goals, their lifelong dreams? And it's so different. Many people in their early days, when they bought their CertaPro business, they bought a job and said, hey, I can make some money. But to Rich's credit, and a lot of people in our organization, now these are big profitable painting operations. I mean, these are people in the community who are now creating wealth, not just for themselves, but for their people. And now they're finding, like, that's not enough for me anymore. I need to do more. How can I make an impact in my community? How can I give back? How can I leave a legacy that's far beyond my painting business? And that truly lifts up the industry, draws more people to us. And you know, like I said, I'm humbled that I get to work with somebody like Rich every day, who is so passionate about doing that and getting energy from that. He gets so much energy from making that sort of impact on people when they make an impact in their communities. So that's really powerful and special.
Yeah, and kudos to both of you guys in the organization, because a lot of organizations, you know, they talk about their core values, they talk about investing in their people and developing leaders and continuous improvement. But then when it comes time to investing in leadership development and specific resources, whether it be internal or external resources to, you know, bring in people in the organization like Rich is doing for your organization, you know, they usually balk at that, right? It's like, oh, we got to take care of marketing spend, or we got to take care of other areas. And, you know, I'm a little biased because I grew up in the organization as a college student myself, and right out of college, you know, learning a lot of the things that the organization stands for. But, you know, I'm sure, Rich, you know, when you know, impact the lives of these entrepreneurs by leaning in as well, which seems to be the theme a little bit of this conversation. I mean, the impact you must feel and the reward you must feel by seeing these entrepreneurs grow their business and overcome certain things. And I mean, how rewarding is that, right? So.
Absolutely. Mike, in today's COVID environment that's relatively new and it's different, how are you seeing that entrepreneurs within the organization, franchise owners, how do they need to think differently? How do they need to approach their role as leaders of the business differently?
Well,
when I say differently, not differently than they are today, but differently than pre-COVID. So COVID hits, and you're seeing some people that are just surviving, and you're seeing some franchise owners that are really thriving. Like, what's the difference between the two? And how are the ones that are thriving, like, how are they approaching this differently? How are they thinking differently about what's happening?
Well, I would say it's rooted in organizational health, Rich. And what I mean by that is the most successful franchises don't have all the answers. Most of the answers lie within their teams. And what we've seen is COVID is impacting areas so differently. You look at what happened in Metro New York and how the virus was treated. People were dying. Actually, it hurts now to be on a ventilator. You shouldn't be on a ventilator now, from what people say, right? So I think what I've seen, and I was just on a flight call yesterday with, for those that don't know what a flight call is it's actually a flight group. It's a peer forum of franchisees that act as a board of directors on each other's businesses. And what they do is they meet regularly, usually about 3 to 4 times a year, and they talk about their businesses, and they get out of being in the business and get to think bigger picture. And so when I'm on the call with my flight group, what I keep hearing, and my flight group, by the way, is probably going to have their best profitability year as a whole they've ever had. Now think about that. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Their sales are going to be backwards anywhere from, 5% to 30% backwards. And yet collectively they're running more profitable businesses. And one, it's a product of them leaning in, asking each other, how do you do this better? I think when you're in a situation where the world is really in chaos, is when you have peers that you trust, you can see through a lot of things. And what we're finding through this pandemic is you can really be more efficient. The economy was going up. I mean, we were riding a wave of prosperity for 10 years, right? And all of a sudden the pandemic hits, and it makes you really question what resources, what am I getting back for those resources? And I think what I'm seeing in these businesses is they're really challenging that question, saying, am I getting a good ROI on that? Am I really challenging my people to be as productive as possible? And what we're seeing is people are doing more with less. And when you do more with less, it moves your productivity up, moves your profitability up, moves your brand experience up. Our customers are happier than they've ever been. And so I think we're going to come out of this pandemic with businesses that go, wow, I didn't really realize how much fat I actually had in my business. And so I think that there's going to be a few years of people running more efficient businesses, leaner business. John, I imagine you probably saw that in your own businesses, right?
Yeah, 100%. I read a study recently that was commissioned over by a group in Europe, and they're saying that over the next 3 to 4 years, a small business are actually expected to grow and be more profitable, but with less and less overhead infrastructure, right, than they currently have today. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic. But you're 100% right. I think this forces entrepreneurs and businesses to look at their businesses a little bit differently. And I'm sure it happens the same with your franchisees, even with your organization, where, those who are just riding by and, think they got this nice cushy job or this nice cushy opportunity, really aren't surviving this opportunity too well, because organizations then look and go, hey, my top performers are going to keep top performing. They're competitive. They're leaning in. They're making stuff happen, just like you're articulating. But those are just in it for the salary, punching the clock, minimalists, unfortunately, are going to have a hard time surviving in this next new COVID world, because you can't have too much fat in your organization. You got to be a lean, mean fighting machine, right? And you got to lean in. Again, it just keeps coming all the way back to that same theme today, which I think is an awesome theme.
Mike, as I look at the impact of COVID on people's health, I don't know the percentages, but the grand majority of people that are dying from COVID have pre-existing conditions. As I look at it in the business world, I think the grand majority of businesses that are going under because of the impact of COVID had pre-existing conditions as a business.
Wow.
Can you speak to what are some of the pre-existing conditions and bad decisions that maybe good times were, and making money in good times allowed people to fund bad decisions that made them a pre-existing condition business? What are some of the things that you're noticing in the franchise world about pre-existing conditions of businesses, and what are those that you see?
Love that question, Rich.
Wow, great question. I would say a pre-existing condition that is out there in business that rears its ugly head is performance accountability. So what I mean by that is, if you manage a salesperson and they're kind of hitting their numbers, but you're having your weekly meeting with them and you're kind of checking the box, like, not really making them feel a little bit uncomfortable, maybe holding them accountable to their process. So I think a good example of a pre-existing condition that some of the businesses that have suffered and may not make it is having performance accountability. And I don't know what you want to call that outside of our world. We call that goal setting and review, and having the skill to do that at a high level, and knowing that you're doing it for the benefit of the individual. So I think when people ride the wave, it makes it's false performance indicators of leaders is really is probably what I don't know what the right word is. It's phantom leadership, maybe, would be something like that. I think that's a really prevalent pre-existing condition that a lot of businesses suffer through because the economy was just humming along, right? And you see it in the businesses that perform in the bad times, that they have got a better handle on that. That's the one that jumps out at me. I'm sure there's others.
Rich, how about you? I mean, what's one pre-existing condition you've seen? Because I know you deal with a lot of entrepreneurs. I have a couple as well. I mean, this is a fascinating question because you're 100% right.
I feel like when there's more money available to an entrepreneur, that excess of money during good times allows them an opportunity to finance bad decisions.
Yep.
And then when you hit bad times, it forces some decisions that should have been made previously, just now you can't finance those bad decisions anymore. Some of the bad decisions, things like avoiding conflict, whether it be with vendors or Mike, to the performance accountability side, making sure people in the business are actually performing and doing the role instead of being so focused on having a good relationship. Good relationship is very important, but good relationship with also people who must perform their function in the business, avoiding conflicts like that. Avoiding conflicts, as I mentioned, with vendors on negotiating what rates could be. Ramping up the accounts receivable and accounts payable, changing those numbers in the business. Those things should have been done long ago, but now that there's not enough money around, like, it's forcing some of those decisions.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I also, the word that keeps going to my mind is strong fundamentals, right? And what you just said is 100% right. The companies who didn't have strong fundamentals didn't have to worry about it. They were, fat, happy, and stupid, right? We're moving on, and everything's fine, and everything's good. And a situation happens like this, and their balance sheet is upside down, or they're taking deferred revenue deposits to pay payroll from last week, in different worlds, and so when you think about fundamentals, one book came to mind for me was Scaling Up by Vern Harnish, and he talks about cash, strategy, people, right? Execution. And if you think about it, like, your percentages should be here and here and here. And you should know your KPIs and your metrics, but that's just, isn't it? You shouldn't just do that when the crisis happens. You should do that at all times, so you're prepared for it. And it's unbelievable, Rich. Like, when you made that comment, you're 100% right. The parallel between the pre-existing conditions in humans and the pre-existing conditions in businesses is a very strong parallel. Because there's a lot of businesses that will not survive this because they didn't take care of their fundamentals year in and year out and year in and year out, and they just thought it was going to be great forever, right? So I think healthy businesses
are getting hurt, but they're generally going to survive. Healthy people are generally going to survive. They're getting hurt. It doesn't feel good to be sick, but businesses are getting sick with not having the same revenue streams, with not being able to fund bad decisions. We make bad decisions in our health, and we eat too much, or we don't exercise, or we don't take care of our mindset. And COVID is impacting people at a depression level. People who didn't take care of their mindset prior to COVID are getting hit more now than the people who did take care of their mindset. Speaking of mindset, Mike, it looks like you had some.
I want to add one more comment to that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
I think what you're talking about is a giant spotlight in the worst of conditions just gets shined on the blind spots in your business. Right. And all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I'm 300,000 in the hole because I have all these deposits and I've already paid all these other people. So I think what you're talking about is blind spots. A blind spot is something you don't see, right? But when you're going through chaos in a very chaotic world that we're in now, all your blind spots become exposed, and that's where I think businesses, who don't have the fortitude, the fundamentals, as you said, John, they really suffer. And one of the reasons why I'm concerned, when the government says, hey, we want to bail out, that's like just allowing those blind spots to perpetuate. And
it's allowing the funding of the bad decisions, and it's not even with the entrepreneur's money. So it's somebody else's
money. It's with
money.
Everyone else's money. And look, I agree. We need more liquidity and we need more things, but to help these businesses. But a lot of that PPP money, there's going to be some people who don't execute those fundamentals. They're going to go, oh my God, I can go buy that boat now, right? And that's what's happening. Our hopefully our CertaPro franchise owners and the people that work with them are saying, like, you need to be diligent and execute and use that money to market your business so you can take share and be, you're going to have to squirrel it away because we don't know what the winter's going to bring. I mean, this pandemic could get worse, and we're kind of hunkering down. We're holding our cash here at CertaPro because there's a lot more unknowns than knowns going into the future. Imagine trying to do an annual financial plan for 2021 today, right? Normally we do them now, John and Rich. And I don't know what's going to happen.
No, you got to do like a month-to-month plan right now sometimes, right?
I've done 5 plans this year.
One thing that comes to mind too that I think is an important conversation is, I think franchisees and franchise organizations have a certain luxury, to your point you mentioned earlier, of being an entrepreneur for themselves, but not being alone, whether it be flight groups or the investments you guys make in leadership development and Rich and other groups. But there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there that don't have that. And having been, a sole entrepreneur myself in certain situations, it could be a very lonely place to be. What would you recommend for entrepreneurs that are out there listening to this, that are on their own, that may not have this, consultants, they have to pay consultants to help them or whatever? Well, there must be other solutions. I know there's other solutions out there for entrepreneurs to get support, for people to lean into them, to challenge their fundamentals. What would you recommend for those other entrepreneurs that are not a part of a group like yours?
Well, first of all, they should be involved in their chamber of commerce. If they're a small business owner, they need to get involved in their community, and that's a great starting spot. There's all sorts of networking groups, LaTip or BNI. Small business owners deal with a lot of the same problems that our franchise owners do. So it's incumbent upon the business owner to lean in and find a network of people that when you can surround yourself with people that have core values that resonate with you, then you see how they make their decisions in their business, then that can become your circle of trust. You need to find people, and I would challenge our CertaPro franchise owners. Yeah, they may have their peers within CertaPro, but the really good ones have their peer outside of our network as well, and they help them see some of the blind spots that maybe, because we're in a bit of a group think sometimes, that they don't see, right? So I think you want to have that sort of peer network, and there's lots of different people that are in the same boat as them that would, really want to latch onto that. So those would be some of my recommendations. And I was involved in some of those groups. Even as a senior leader, there's a group called Vistage. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Yeah, very good.
That's a group for a more mature business leader who's got some infrastructure. And there's even YPO, right? For bigger businesses that have a certain volume. So those are all different options to have that mentor peer group to help you that I've experienced personally and professionally.
Mike, can you speak to just self-care is just becoming really on the forefront? And there's something that I heard the other week that was self-care is not selfish. And I thought that was kind of a cool way to say it. It resonated. And this can be so draining in the COVID environment and the news and just how things are going. How do you recharge? How do you take care of yourself and your mindset? What do you do to do that as a leader, as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I would say the number one thing you need to do around self-care is rooted in priority management, or some people, it's not time management. Priority management is putting the big rocks in your schedule that are immovable. And one of the big rocks for me is, probably 2 to 3 days a week, I play pickleball or tennis or racquetball early in the morning before I start my day. That's what I've been doing lately. During the peak of the pandemic, when we were literally locked down here in Pennsylvania, I got a buddy and we did the 100 push-up a day challenge. We did it for 3 months straight until we could get out and start exercising again together. And so, and of course, I need some sort of accountability partner when it comes to exercise. And that's why I do a lot of group sports, because I enjoy that competitiveness, as I said earlier, but also it kind of keeps me accountable. So you have to make the time, and you have to be, some people say, oh, you're being selfish. You want to go, when you play golf, I want to walk when I play golf because I want the exercise, or I want to play pickleball, or I want to do this. And well, shouldn't you be spending more time at work, or shouldn't you be spending time with your kids? Well, I need that time so I can have the energy to be the best father I can be, to be the best CEO of CertaPro I can be. And when I get joy and energized by having some of that in my life, and right now I'm getting more of it because we're a little bit more open than we were. It was tough. It was really tough in April when there was nothing going on here in Pennsylvania, and literally Governor Wolf had locked us down. Unless you're going to the grocery store, you really, really shouldn't be leaving your house. And that lasted for 50 days. And that was tough. And but I had the push-ups every day, and we were sending texts back and forth. That kind of helped, right? You couldn't even go to a gym, right? So those are some things, you know, surround yourself with people who have some of those sort of like mindsets and have that accountability partner. Those are some things, but you got to make the time and know that you're not sacrificing that notion of selfish. I find that to be kind of a weird oxymoron, right? You know, and Rich, you told me, and I'll never forget it, you know, I need to be the best husband to Shelby so I can be the best father to my children, but I need to be the best husband and before I can be the best father. And I thought that was a really relevant point that still resonates with me when you shared that, you know, date night and having a great relationship with your spouse really matters if you want to be the best father you can be, or best mother, you know, depending on who you are on this call. Those things I think really matter. So.
And for us, Shelby and I have real clarity on the most important thing is we have individual health in terms of mental, physical, everything. Like, we have to be healthy individuals is number one. Number two for us is we then have to engage in having a healthy marriage. That's number two. Number three is then the kids. Like, how are we going to be good parents if we're not healthy individuals, if we're not right in our head, if we're not feeling good about ourselves, if we don't feel good about our relationship, how are we going to be good parents? And then number four is just everything else. Everything else just comes after that. And when things don't feel right in the household, it's when one of us has that order wrong. We're putting the kids as number one, or we're putting even our relationship ahead of our own health, or we're putting whatever we're doing. Oh, there's this activity that we need to go do, but there's conflict with one of the kids that we're having to bury in order to enjoy the activity, and it doesn't feel right. Like, if we go in that order, healthy individuals in a healthy marriage who are focused then on the kids as number third and then everything else, it tends to work. And you know, I don't remember when I shared that with you, but it sounds like it resonated.
Hey, at one point I was number one or two, so it's changed a lot since college or post college.
That's right. Mike, as we're starting to wrap up here, just a final thought would love to grab from you is the cost of entrepreneurial lessons can be quite high. And the best lessons are the ones where we could get borrowed wisdom from people who had an expensive lesson, but then pass that on. You could borrow that wisdom. You didn't have to pay the price. They did, and they were generous enough to share it. What's one piece of advice that you would have for every entrepreneur so that they don't have to pay a price for that lesson? They could just listen to you now.
I would say race to the conflict. People really struggle with that, I think, in general. I'll give you a good example. In 2007-ish, we started the media buying co-ops at CertaPro Painters, and we had a lot of success with it in the first year. That was 2007. We went into the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009. And I remember going into the New York Co-op, which was at the time the largest collection of franchisees, and they were going to spend a huge amount of money. And we based the amount of the media buy on their projected sales. And we spent the media based on their projected amount of sales. And I did, of course, the recession hit. They didn't come anywhere near where they were supposed to with the sales. And we had a $250,000 bill we owed to this media buyer. And I knew what was happening. I didn't race to the conflict. And then I had to go in the worst of times when all my franchisees were really struggling financially. And I had to go individually and say, I need $3,000 from you. I need $5,000 from you. I need this. When they didn't have the money to go pay a debt that we owed as a collective group. And if I'd have raced to that conflict earlier, I could have shut down some of our expenditures, and really, those franchisees were hurt by that. And that was a really painful lesson. We got through it, but I made some mistakes there that were really tough.
And that sounds like an expensive lesson in addition to financially, to not shut down the expenditure, but also sounds like a bit of an expense or a tax to the relationships to have to then go back and ask for money.
Yeah, it hurt the relationships, you know, fortunately there were relationships there, and if you're vulnerable and, you know, sometimes you own up to your part of the mistake, you'd be surprised how forgiving people can be. But it was a really, really, really hard lesson, and I wish I didn't make it, but I learned a lot from it, and I think you know, you brought it up earlier. You know, people struggle to address conflict, and when things are good, blind spots stay hidden, and you need to have a bit more of that performance accountability to ask more questions, to probe a little bit deeper, to hold some uncomfortable tension with people. If you really want to, if you really have their best interests at heart, if you care that much about them, then, and that's what Rich Wilson had in me. He cared that much about me to ask the harder question, to probe a little bit deeper, to expect a little bit more. And in the end, it made me a better human. It made me a better leader. Sometimes it hurt along the way, but that still resonates with me today.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I can't thank you enough for coming on with us. I mean, I think it was 23 years ago I met you when you were a bartender in Iowa. And
Yeah.
to see where you are now and think about the impact you're going to make over the next 23 years and where you're going to keep going with the competitive spirit, leaning into challenges, developing leaders, and everything else. I wish you the best of success, and great job killing it, and great job leaning in. I think that's a great theme for today, and the key to success for anybody listening. So thank you
Well,
very
I
much.
appreciate the opportunity. Certainly enjoyed the conversation. Far exceeded my expectations. You brought stuff out of me that I didn't even know was in there. So thanks again.
Well, Rich is pretty good at that.
For being there.
Both of you.
Thanks for being
Both
there.
of you.